podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Haway, the podcast. It's Martin here, and you're joining us for a Q&A episode today, and there's tons to talk about, so we'll get straight into it. And I've got Andrew Smithson with me today to answer a few of your questions that you've sent in. And Andrew, there's always stuff to talk about, isn't it? Win, lose or draw, there's always something to talk about surrounding Sunderland AFC.
Oh, without doubt, Martin. The only difference is when it's on the back of a win, it's all a little more positive and everybody's in a better frame of mind. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it and see what's on people's minds.
No, there's a lot of stuff on people's minds, and predictably some of the reaction from the Spurs game on Sunday is top of the list. So LD on X has asked, are Tottenham the biggest set of crybabies we've ever seen? Now, I think there's a serious point in here. I know the question might be a little bit teasing them, I guess, because the reaction, I've never actually seen or experienced a reaction as bad as the Spurs fans seem to have gone on social media. The toys and everything's come out of the bloody pram. Even the prams come out of the pram, and I don't know how you manage that. Like the reaction has been nuts, hasn't
it? It has. I wonder how much of it is panic on their part. They're not used. Well, I was going to say they're not used to being in this situation, but they were in this situation last season pretty much. As for the worst example of it, I mean, it's probably the worst we've seen since our previous game when we beat the Mags, and that lot had a little paddy as well. It's just crazy. It seems to be how the game is. Certainly in the Premier League now, there always has to be somebody in crisis, and Spurs are a great fit for that because of their expectations and how big they are and all of this type of thing. But yeah, it's been spectacular. And I've got to admit, a little bit unfair on Sunderland, because there's this kind of subtext that Spurs shouldn't be losing to Sunderland. You know, people seem surprised, but we've played well all season, so people need to change their attitudes towards us. And the other thing, a lot of the comments being made, I just think are completely inaccurate and one-eyed. I just think it is. It's people who are stressed, worried. They're looking for somebody to blame, and they're just lashing out at anybody and everybody.
I don't know if you saw the video that a Spurs fan put together, a video compilation of apparently all of the bad refereeing decisions that went against them on Sunday. And the first example that they used was a very clean tackle by Noah Siddiqui, who won the ball. And the rationale for including that one was, but we got a foul given against us one game for a tackle like that. And you just go, you lot are so fixated on things going on that are actually outside of your control. And the reality is, if Spurs put in the type of performance in terms of the commitment and the amount of trying that Sunderland put in every week, the work rate, the off-the-ball stuff, the togetherness, they wouldn't be in that situation at all. I think there was a graphic that Sky Sports put up about Granit Xhaka's performance in terms of the number of passes he'd made, the number of interceptions he'd made, tackles made, meters covered, all that sort of stuff. And he pretty much outshone the three Spurs midfield players combined. I think it said the three Spurs midfield players combined did not win a tackle all game on Sunday. Now, I don't care if you got refereeing decisions going against you. I actually don't think the referee gave too much wrong or got too much wrong on Sunday. When you look now, I've tried to be really impartial about this, looking at the referees, the clips of the referees' calls and all that sort of stuff. I think you could argue about the one where the lad went through an 09 got in front of him and he went down. And he went down very easily. And the referee was behind it, and it looked as if the lad had gone down very easily. And VAR can't apparently get involved in that because it's outside the box and it's not a possible red card because there was a covering defender. So VAR couldn't get involved in that one. But, going to your point, Jack Asprey has asked, does it annoy you that we seem to be getting very little recognition from the mainstream media? All the talk from the weekend before and after the game was all about De Zerbi and Spurs. And I know they were the story, but we were still the home team that day. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting credit for. And, sometimes it's nice to fly under the radar and we just get on with things and do our own thing and all that sort of stuff. And I think if you look ahead to the summer, I would much rather the media weren't talking about our players so much and we just fly under the radar and crack on with it, But there is an element of this, isn't there, where we're actually not getting any or a great deal of credit for the performances and for the results that we have got so far.
I'm in 100% agreement on that one. We should be one of the big stories. Newly promoted team in an era where every newly promoted team struggles until we come along. And we are, we're not just comfortable in the league. We are points-wise very close to the European places. There's been very few times where teams have rolled us over. The transformation Sunderland has gone through has been massive, and it deserves to be reflected. But I take your point in that perhaps it suits us. I think it maybe suits us as a club to be an underdog. So, all right, it's not the end of the world that we're not getting more praise, but it does seem a little bit unfair. As for Spurs and their response, I agree. I don't think the referee was particularly bad. They kept singing "You're not fit to referee," the away fans. And I was thinking, well, you're a bit late to the party on that because everybody's been unhappy with referees for don't know how long. But their anger should have been directed towards their players because there was a few hefty challenges and there were a few times when it was physical, but they ended up bottling it. And in the last half an hour or so, it looked like they didn't fancy it. They'd spent the day creating chances, didn't put any of them away, conceded a goal, and for me, they've only got themselves to blame. They shouldn't be looking at offers and being so adamant that the referee is in some way done them over, because I just don't see it.
And you look at the Spurs performance as well, and we're not going to labour on it too much because I think it has been talked about a lot. But their players were chucking themselves to the ground at the slightest thing, and they were more concerned about trying to win free kicks and trying to con the referee than actually playing the game of football. And if they bloody stood up, and I think who was it? Was it Calvin was saying on a podcast that we did? Or it might be on the post-match. Yeah, it might be on the post-match podcast that you did in the pub, which was brilliant, by the way. I really enjoyed listening to that one. But somebody said about the Spurs, a Spurs fan saying, we're the better side, or we've got the better team than you. And, player for player, there might well be some players in that Spurs side that, from a career point of view and whatever else, you might go, from the outside looking in, they should be better than their opponent in the Sunderland side. And I don't know enough about Spurs to say whether that's right or not. But I don't think anybody can argue that as a team, as a collective group of players and individuals, I don't think there's actually many better in the Premier League. Look, we might lose out on an individual moment of brilliance and skill and all that sort of stuff at certain points, and we have done this season. But as a team, I've never seen a better team play for Sunderland as a collective group of people. And that goes to the 17, 18, 20 people in the squad, playing staff. I've never seen a better team just in terms of working together, knowing what each other's doing, and that, credit to Regis Labris and all that sort of stuff as well for organising that way. But I just think there's this whole narrative, and I actually think it's interesting that Jack's asked about the reaction of the mainstream media, because I do think we have got some decent credit with the mainstream media. Obviously, we're not a massive story after we've kind of made a fist of staying up and have stayed up. We're not a massive story because you've got huge things going on top of the table, huge things going on at the bottom of the table. But I listened to a great podcast from The Athletic the other day, and they were going, okay, how have Sunderland stayed up, and really dug into it. And we got a lot of praise for it. I actually think it's from opposition the fans of established Premier League clubs. We aren't getting any credit from them at all. And, you know, I've read so many comments from different team supporters over the past month, and you can kind of guess who a lot of them are from. But we get absolutely no, they play shit football, the worst football side, the hit and hope, they're lucky every week, they get away with this every week. And it's absolute nonsense. And it's because we've come up and really upset the establishment, if you like, the established clubs who think they have a divine right to be there. And the three promoted clubs just, you know, go and play some nice tippy-tappy football, get relegated, come back up in a couple of seasons, play some nice tippy-tappy football again, piss off again. And we haven't done that. And I think it's really thrown some clubs' fans because they think, oh, shit, we're in a bit of danger now. And, you know, after this reaction of the Spurs fans, I am desperately hoping that they go down. Now, Marley Hannon has asked a follow-up question to this. And he's asked, what was your thoughts on the Spurs fans' reactions to Brobbey? Now, he's saying, to be clear, I don't mean the racist stuff, just purely about the game. And we've got a question about the racist abuse that Brian Brobbey suffered after the game, which we'll come on to shortly. But it's interesting that physicality that Brobbey has in abundance, right? People, again, seem to have been put out by the fact that a player can be physical, because you haven't seen it very often in the Premier League over the past decade or so. That sort of style of centre-forward has kind of gone out of fashion a bit. But it's really interesting that there's this reaction to a player being able to use his physical strength to hold the ball up, to win the ball. And, you know, Joe Lewins has also asked when the official's going to protect Brobbey. He gets nothing week in, week out, which might seem, from the outside looking in, might seem like a tongue-in-cheek question after the weekend. But it's not, because he gets ragged left, right and centre. And it's almost like he's penalised by the referees for being strong. And the threshold for him getting a foul is significantly higher because of his strength. And I'm just baffled. I'm just baffled by this. I think it's these people who've been brainwashed by Pep's style of football over the past decade, thinking there's only one way to play football. You can't, you know, have a physical contact. You've got to do this, that, and the other, pass it around nicely, do flicks and tricks and skills. And that's not the only way to play football. And I think it's partly that's upset the apple cart a little bit. And people are going, well, you're not allowed to do that. Well, you are, just nobody's done it for the past 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. You're answering it for me there, because a lot of the things you're saying are how I see it as well. You're right that there appears to be a lot of sneering towards Sunderland and making excuses. I think some fans and some clubs are perhaps embarrassed because we've come along and proven that a lot of the tropes over the last few years are inaccurate. It's always, oh, you've got to spend mega money. You've got to do it this way. You've got to do it that way. There's a glass ceiling. Clubs can't come from nowhere and compete. Well, we've stuck our fingers up to all of that, and we're rewriting the rule book. We're showing that it's possible to build a squad very quickly whilst maintaining a bit of unity. We have spent money, but not to, in relative terms, not at extreme cost. So I think it's embarrassed some sets of fans, and they're probably thinking, well, hang on, why don't we do it like that? And as for Brobbey in particular, there's no rule. You have to play football in a certain way. I actually like watching Brobbey's style. I think it's brilliant. I think it's more than he's just physical. He's got real good skills to go alongside his frame and strength. He's very intelligent. There's a lot of balls and flicks that he does that are pretty smart. It's not a one-man team. So even if Brobbey did all of that type of stuff, you'd still have to have players understanding him and reading him. So it's clearly something we've worked on. I'm perplexed. You said there Spurs might have more talented individuals. Well, that counts for nothing, because I'm looking at a Premier League table here and it says how many games we've won, and it's a lot more than Spurs, and it's a lot more than other established Premier League clubs. Forest, West Ham. I mean, Forest were going great guns last year, but we've come along and we've very quickly overtaken some of these sides. That's not fluke. That's their fault for not keeping up with us. So I've got very little time for some of the nonsense is being said. And just quickly going back to Brobbey there, I always like to listen back to games on 5 Live. BBC Sound lets you play back commentary of games. That's how sad I am. That's what I do with my spare time. I listen to a commentary of a game I've already been to. But Pat Nevin, who is an analysis, Pat Nevin, who's a pundit, is always going to say,
yeah, go for pundit.
Yeah, Pat Nevin, who's a pundit, I do respect and I think is fairly balanced. At no point, or his commentator either, at no point are they saying things like lucky or Sunderland have been a bit too physical. They, as neutrals, are commentating on it, and their viewpoint is very much Sunderland played well, and that's why they won. The Brobbey incident where the defender and the keeper get injured. I mean, I've seen people calling for red cards and all sorts, and I can kind of see why people are a bit concerned, and it was an unpleasant outcome, but they, at no point in the commentary, they don't even react initially. They just say, "Oh, and the keeper's come through and collected a through ball." Yeah. Nevin, at no point does he suggest that it's a foul or Brobbey's being over aggressive. He just talks about it as matter of fact in a situation that it's a bit of a shame, but it's one of those things that happen in the game. So that, to me, says it isn't just my Sunderland spectacles watching this. That, to me, says a lot of the comments and accusations are unfair, to say the least.
Oh, I defy anybody to be able to run full pelt with somebody in front of them. That person stops, and you not to put your arms up and run into them. Yeah. I defy, it's physically impossible to do. I defy anybody to be able to do that. And I think, we said after the game on the Monday supplement pod, I think it's been covered on Sky as well. I think Dermot Gallagher, the former referee, had said something about, we shouldn't be looking at the effect of that collision in terms of judging that foul. And, you're right. At the time, you don't think anything of it. If the goalkeeper hadn't come out like that, he doesn't get hurt. It's unfortunate. I feel sorry for both of those players who've been injured. Obviously, the lad Romero looks as if he might miss the World Cup, and obviously you don't want that for any player, right? But I think it's really important that we don't get carried away, and football doesn't get carried away by this. And I just have a concern that going into the next game, all eyes are going to be on Brobbey. And the referees are going to be paying him particular attention. But, you look at it the other way, and, going back to Joe's question there about the protection that he gets, that one that, again, made some highlights clips where he kind of shrugs the lad off. That's because he didn't get the foul blown up. The lad's all over his back. He's fouling him.
Yeah.
The referee doesn't blow for the foul. So he's trying to shrug him off. Well, what's he supposed to do? If he's not getting the foul, what's he supposed to do? And the lad's all over his back. And there's, I've chosen an image for the cover of this podcast of another incident where the Spurs defender's got both arms wrapped around him. And we didn't get a free kick for that, I don't think. And it's just constant. But it seems you've got a higher bar for any sort of foul based on his strength.
I'm glad you've brought me back to that and back to that question because, yeah, you're right. It doesn't seem as if he gets the same, is refereed to the same levels as other players. In wider terms, it's a concern because it is a contact sport, you know. You are allowed to have a bit of physicality
Still,
in it.
just.
Yeah, but you are allowed to have a bit about you.
Not in North London, apparently.
Well, exactly. You're allowed to have a bit about you unless you're Brian Brobbey. And yeah, that incident where I think that's what he got his caution for.
He did, yeah.
I've not seen, talking about North London, talking about Arsene Wenger and not seeing the incident. I've not seen the highlights back of that. But to me, it felt as if he was off balance because he was being dragged backwards. And again, like you say, with the incident where if somebody stops in front of you, you automatically put your arms up. If you're being pulled backwards, your body naturally, your arms raise. It's just, it's staggering. And there was one where I can't remember who it was, but it was a ball forward in the first half, and he runs onto it, and the defender can't be bothered to like match him up, so just shoves him over. It's bizarre, and I'd love to hear the referee's thoughts on some of these incidents and just get their justification as to why we're not seeing a few more free kicks here and there.
No, it'll be interesting, but we're going to leave the game itself there. We're going to move on to some serious stuff after the game because, as most people will know, Brian Brobbey was subjected to some pretty horrendous racist abuse on social media. And Lad of Light asks, I was hoping to ask a positive question, but oh well. Racism is a cancer in our society and there's no place in sport or any other area of modern life. What do you think the club could do to reduce the amount of hate being launched at players, if anything? And hashtag show racism the red card. And it's a really important discussion to have, but I'm at a bit of a loss in terms of what the club can do, apart from what they do in terms of issuing statements saying we stand against this completely. It's noticeable, by the way, Spurs haven't put anything out yet. And it's, Wednesday morning that we're recording this, and Spurs still haven't condemned any of that. As far as I know, anyway, they certainly hadn't by last night. And you've got all of this stuff going on with these accounts that seem to be based in various far-flung corners of the world, linked to gambling sites and all this sort of stuff. And it's just horrendous. I don't know what the clubs can do as a broader thing, but certainly social media companies and stuff like that should be able to do something to stop that, because it's just horrendous and pathetic and whatever other adjective you want to throw at it.
It is. It's ridiculous that we even have to have these conversations and come up with adjectives because, yeah, we all know it's ridiculous. So why is it happening? The Premier League is global now, so you expect there to be eyes on it from all over the world. It doesn't matter to me whether some of these comments are coming from sources abroad or coming from people in the grounds, people watching it locally. It's all abhorrent. It's bizarre the gymnastics people go through because a player's skin color or background or culture or whatever only seems to annoy them if they've lost a bet or their team's losing, people somehow think it's acceptable to be racist towards a player from an opposition team, even though there might be somebody in their own team who is from a similar background or is an international teammate of this player. I mean, just again, I'm trying to understand the thought process of people who are mindless. So
you're probably giving them a lot of credit by I think there is any sort of thought or process in that. But,
I certainly don't mean to do that, Martin. I certainly don't mean to give them any credit. Yeah. In terms of how it's handled, it staggers me and it upsets me that social media platforms can very quickly delete your tweets if it says something that the people running these channels don't like, or if you post a video of a Premier League clip, it gets taken down. So, we've got to be careful about upsetting the rights holders to some footage, but we can allow this type of thing to continue. So I think the platforms themselves need to work harder to stamp this out and make people realize that their views aren't appropriate. As for the club, this might be naive of me, and I don't use social media. I only see these clips when somebody such as yourself mentions it. Do Sunderland take a stand and say, right, we're going to log out of our accounts for a week? Do the Premier League do that? Do the Premier League say, our clubs are not going to post on any of these accounts until something tangible is done to punish and ban these people? Because that's what will then cause these companies to panic when they're not getting the clicks, when they're not getting the views and all of that type of thing. They might think, flipping heck, about time we did something about this. I don't know. That might not. I don't know.
No, I think that's a fair point. I think it's a good idea, actually. And it's, you go into all sorts of other conversations then, don't you, about having some sort of proof of ID to be able to post on social media, have some responsibility for what you're actually posting rather than having anonymous accounts and being able to hide behind all sorts of different things. Yeah. But you've got the aspect to it. And to be fair, it's not just on social media. We saw it at Newcastle where the Crowder got abuse from the crowd and the game got stopped and it was reported and somebody's been arrested and charged with stuff. So, it's not just confined to social media, but I think it's obviously a lot more prevalent on there. And whether that's by sheer volume of numbers or anything like that, but it's certainly an increasing issue, and it always seems to be when something is going against the team or whoever that people are supporting. So anyway, look, it's not something that we're going to sort out today between you and I, mate, but it's certainly something that I think is important that is kept in the conversation because it is a problem in 2026. It really should not be. We will take a very short break there and back after a couple of ads.
TaxAct knows filing taxes can be confusing, so we have live experts on hand who can help answer any questions you may have. Questions like, can I claim my SUV as my home office if I answer work emails in my car? If I adopted 12 dogs this year, can I list them as dependents? And, am I doing this right or am I doing this very, very wrong? Our experts have the answers to those questions and many others. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Welcome back to Haway, the podcast, and Andrew and I are answering your questions, or doing our best to answer your questions anyway. And Andrew, we did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, myself, you and Kelvin, on the Legends walkway at Sunderland, and we had a list of 46, and we spent an hour or two debating who should make the final 14. The winners of that vote were announced apparently at it was at half time or before the game on Sunday, and it's caused a little bit of controversy, I think, hasn't it? There was some people who made the final cut who weren't even in the shortlist. There's some people who have been left out. You've got the likes of Charlie Buchan has been left out. Bobby Gurney, I think, has been left out. People who were involved in the very early stages of the club, the first 40, 50 years of the club's existence, have been ignored. And Daniel McGuinn on X has asked, can we discuss and hopefully get an official review of the legends, in inverted commas, chosen and announced at half-time? Some glaring omissions and some embarrassing picks. It's an insult to our illustrious history and those that paid to have a stone next to a legend. Now, I think there have been a few names who are probably more contentious than others included. Jill Scott, I think, is one who has caused a bit of controversy. Bob Murray, and I thought his inclusion in the whole thing was a political bit rather than anything at all to do with honouring the 14 Sunderland legends. You know, he's already got the Murray gates outside the ground anyway. Jermaine Defoe was voted in despite not even being on the shortlist. People like Bobby Gurney, Dave Halliday, Charlie Buchan, Johnny Campbell, all of these names, Jimmy Miller, people who we talk about pretty regularly on the On This Week pods, have all been excluded. I think people like Kevin Ball have been included. There's obviously some recency bias there. There's nothing against Bally, but in terms of your 14 top legends who've ever been involved with the club, I'm not sure he would make the cut in everybody's list. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame because such a really good idea that had everybody buzzing and everybody thinking, oh yeah, this sounds great. This is going to really make the stadium feel special and we're going to really get to honour some big names. There's now a bit of a negative twist to it all, and there's a lot of recrimination and debate and division. There was always going to be a bit of recency bias. That's the nature of things. And people voting who were in their 20s and 30s are probably going to be fonder of somebody they've seen play themselves than somebody they've only read about in a textbook or seen a clip of. I get that, but yeah, this seems a bit more than that. There is a feeling that there's been a bit of jiggery pokery behind the scenes to maybe position certain people in there. You know, some of those are going to be very good. Some of those choices are going to be very good in terms of PR. And when these events get launched, Jermaine Defoe's going to be available to attend. You know, there's going to be people there who can attend the function now and do a bit of publicity around it and what have you. So there is that sense almost as if it's worked out particularly well for the club. I could be talking out of hand there, and this could all be all legitimate, and everything was done fair and square. But certainly people do feel as if it's all a bit convenient and a bit not right that some of the names have missed out. Certainly, I think there's a few names that virtually everybody would have agreed with. I mean, listen, I would have, after Sunday and that turn he did towards the end of the game where Aldrete dropped a shoulder and spun round, and instead of the ball going out for a goal kick, started speeding up, I would have given him a stone just for that. It was brilliant. So there's always going to be personal bias, but just a bit of a shame, and maybe it is one that we have a proper, longer conversation about and just try and get our heads around why the list looks like it does.
I think it's a really interesting thing to talk about, isn't it? And we're not going to labour on it too much in today's pod because we've still got a ton of questions to get through. But I think if somebody had said, right, these are the 14 names Rob Mason's chosen as club historian to be honoured, everyone goes, fine, might disagree with that one, might not have picked him, Rob, but at least there's some person who's owning the rationale and you explain why and all that sort of stuff. here to have names who weren't even on that shortlist put in is quite baffling. Although you could vote for somebody regardless of whether they were included in that shortlist or not, but I just find it all a bit. I think it's just a real shame because, as you say, it was such a brilliant idea, such well-intentioned ideas, and they haven't executed it properly. And look, I'm not putting two and two together to any, well, I kind of am, but not to any great extent. But does that happen with David Bruce still at the club? I think he's, his departure, I think it was, by the sound of it, was his idea, or he had a big part in getting this off the ground. Does somebody who knows Sunderland go, you can't do that without Bobby Gurney on there? And again, I don't wish to put two and two together for everybody, but does that happen? I don't know.
Rob is a really good friend of mine. I love him to bits. I genuinely haven't spoken to him about this. I mean, he might be saying, I don't want to name the list of 14 stones. I don't want the bother. He might be thinking I'm more than happy it went to a public vote. It just, I don't know. There's just something about it doesn't quite add up. And again, am I now putting more into this than there actually is? But announcing it on a tannoy when people are maybe not in their seats, maybe nip to the toilet or getting a drink or whatever, almost as if the club themselves wanted to just, quickly get the news out there and move on, kind of like bury the story a bit. That might just be me making things up now.
Well, to be fair, they made a lot of the launch of it. There was a lot of publicity went on the launch of it. There's nothing on the club site announcing the people who've been voted. So, I think there's probably something in that. We will move on though, but I want to put this into your mind. I'm going to come back to you at the end of the pod for this one, because Sam Quigley has asked, what is your SAFC Mount Rushmore of the last decade? Andrew, and the last decade, I think, is probably slim pickings for Mount Rushmore. So you might be looking at somebody made of granite for that, but I'll come back to you at the end.
I think I've worked out that one. I think I know where you're going with that.
But we're going to move on because obviously we are flying relatively high in the table. And when you look at the points for the European spots, we're certainly not far off. And a decent run-in will see us with a good shout of getting European football. Now, there's a few questions on this. I'm going to go through a few and we can talk broadly about some of the points raised. So Martin Bell has said, we're 16 points clear of the bottom three with 6 games to go, 18 points to play for. Every chance will be mathematically safe by mid-April. I think that's pretty much now. I think we don't need too much more to be completely mathematically secure, don't we? But I don't think anything else will happen like that. Just how ludicrous would that have sounded 8 months ago? And it's nuts, isn't it? When you look at where we are, what we've done. And it's a situation, and this is football, right? Where you go from game to game and you're all consumed in the last game, the next game, injuries, all that sort of stuff. It's not very often you get the chance to kind of sit back and go, bloody hell, we've actually done incredibly well. I actually think the 3-week gap in between the Derby win and the Spurs game gave us a little bit of an opportunity to do that. But even so, if you'd said, before we kicked off against West Ham, if you'd said by mid-April, we're going to be 16 points clear of the bottom three, 18 points to play for still, got a chance of Europe, you go, I'll have a pint of what you're drinking, mate, because it seems a pretty good deal. And I think we'll go through all of this at the end of the season. We will have so much time to reflect on the last sort of 12 months in this season. But remarkable, absolutely remarkable.
It is. I wouldn't have a pint. I think I would have just had a half, just because I don't think I'd be able to. It's obviously strong gear, and I think it'll maybe send us loopy. I can't remember now. I mean, all I do with my time is either talk about Sunderland or listen to people talking about Sunderland. But somebody made the point recently that if we have a bit of a slow run in and end up finishing 14th or 15th, we might look at that as a bit of a disappointment. Rewind and take us back to the start of the season. People would have been absolutely loving 14th or 15th.
No, that's right.
So it's staggering where we are. I think at the very least a top half finish should be our aim now. That would be a nice achievement. Europe would be fantastic. I don't think it would be too soon. I think you can just take I think you should just take the opportunity when it comes, and we've shown we can recruit accordingly. It's bizarre to be now watching other competitions and following them because of all the various ramifications of results. And if so-and-so wins this tournament, it gives us an extra place to potentially fight for. It's odd now to be thinking, oh, this Champions League game or this Europa League game is going to have an impact on Sunderland's fortunes. And hey, listen, football's meant to be fun. So let's enjoy this chase. If it doesn't come off, it's not the end of the world because it wasn't what many of us were aiming for. But it would be a lovely thing to do and to say, hey, here we are. We've gone from a club that was on its knees to now a club in Europe. And the beauty to all of this is I really genuinely believe that this is only the start. I don't think this has to be a one-off, and if we don't make it, it'll never come up again. I think we're seeing what Sunderland on this trajectory could achieve longer term.
No, that's absolutely right. And Michael Bowers was giving us a question, it's more of a comment, really, about the progression of the season. How mental do you think it is, the fact that we're having a genuine conversation about being in Europe next season, even if we don't make it? Less than a year ago, we were about to play Coventry in the Championship playoff semi-finals after 5 straight losses. Crazy to think. But coming on to the Europe conversation, Andrew, Elliot at Ian Brown 4354 on X says, how good an opportunity is it to get Europe this season? A large portion of the fan base, including myself, have never seen Sunderland in Europe, and I'm confident the club will have a plan to sustain it next season and to learn off what's happened to Forest and Palace. John Harrison says, football and sporting your club is about enjoyment at the moment. I don't see any negatives to any potential European involvement. Let's get carried away, man, and dust off those passports. Need them now with Brexit, don't we? We wouldn't have needed them before. Michael Dunn says, how far will we make it in the Europa League next season? And Paul Rackstraw, who's a regular contributor, so thank you, Paul, for sending in your questions, says, do we need to go all out to recreate the early season buzz, especially for the remaining home games? Have a similar finish to the season as we started it when we're going on the European away day next season. It's more than just a dream now, it's within reach. And there's a couple of bits in there that I want to sort of talk about, and Europe would be fantastic. I don't buy this, it'll be too early, we're better off waiting for that. People said that about going up last season. We take, if it's there, we take it. You know, you've got to be, let's be realistic about it, you've got to be 60, really, to have seen us play in Europe.
Yeah.
I would say probably at youngest. So the opportunity isn't going to be one that we should pass up or take lightly. We should be going all out to finish in a European spot if we can possibly do it. 6 games left. It's almost like it's a mini competition to get there, isn't it?
It is. And I think, again, I heard somebody else make the point that a lot of the teams in this little playoff group, as you put it, have games against each other. So that's going to help us determine what's going to happen. I think Sunderland, we've got games against, Villa are probably aiming higher than us.
Everton, Chelsea, Man United, we've got games against other teams going for those European spots. And if you look at our fixtures, Aston Villa away, Forest at home, Wolves away, Man United at home, Everton away, Chelsea at home. 6 good games there, 6 games that you think there's points there. If we play our best, there's points there. Steve Richards at Stitcho Steve asks, how many points do you think we'll get from our last 6 games? I think at least 7. I think that's been conservative, and it's probably come back and bite us on the arse when we get 5 or 6 straight defeats, won't it? But you look at the Villa game, and tough game, but you wouldn't be surprised if we came away with something. Forest, again, tough game. They're going to be battling for points, but that should make it a bit more of an open game than maybe would have been otherwise. No reason why we can't get something from that game. Wolves away game, they've been playing well. I watched their game against West Ham the other day, and they actually played all right, but they just looked so loose at the back. You can get in, score goals against them. Manchester United at home. Leeds went to Old Trafford and beat them just the other day. Although they did have somebody sent off for stroking somebody's ponytail, so that always helps. Everton away, Chelsea at home. The last 2 games could be, big games for both of those clubs in terms of playing us for European points. So there's plenty of points there if we are playing well.
Oh, without doubt, I think double figures in terms of points is achievable. Are you not so convinced on that one?
I'll take it.
By the way, one of the correspondents there was called, I think, at Ian Brown 4354. Yeah. Maybe if Spurs had lined up in that formation, they might have had a chance of outworking Granit Xhaka in midfield. The fact that so many people have got in touch there and said, is Europe a possibility? Should we go all out for it? Do the fans need to recreate the atmosphere of some of the early games? That suggests there is a hunger there. Like you say, there's a lot of people who've supported Sunderland all of their lives, and they haven't had that pleasure yet. It helps that this season there's so many European places available. That makes it more achievable. But yeah, this is not pie in the sky. This is not, we need snookers to qualify for Europe and we need teams to go on bad runs. If we continue in the form we've been on, I think, wasn't this only the second time we've won consecutive games this season? I
believe so, yeah.
And we've won 2 games on the trot away from home in the Premier League for the first time in, I think it's well over a decade now. I think the last time we did it was in the Great Escape season when we, funnily enough, it was against Chelsea and Man United.
Yeah.
And we're doing things in the Premier League and at a level we've not done for a while. We are well in the mix. And I wouldn't be surprised if that Everton game is particularly pivotal, because at the moment, there's a point between us. There's no reason to think that by those last couple of games, we're not right in there.
It would be nice to complete the circle, wouldn't it, and deny David Moyes European football later on in the season. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. One of the things I wanted to pull out in the comment that Elliot at Ian Brown's Spurs lineup made, he said, learn off what's happened to Forest and Palace. I think that's a really, really good observation, because we heard all summer, didn't we, that Sunderland had studied what promoted clubs had done in the past, looked at what had gone right, looked at more often not what had gone wrong, try to learn from that and try to do things a little bit differently, and in addressing those areas that they thought the clubs had got things wrong, whether that's in terms of transfer activity, whether that's in terms of tactics, approaches to games, all that sort of stuff. The analysis into what has gone on in the past has been huge, and that's informed what we've done this season. You look at the European campaigns at clubs, like we want to be, who might finish 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th in the Premier League. The European campaigns, there's this school of thought that the amount of games that you have to play in Europe is detrimental to your Premier League football. And I think it's probably quite right. You're playing an enormous amount of games compared to what you would play just with domestic football. But you can rest assured the club have looked at what's happened to Forest this season in Europe, looked at what's happened to Palace, looked at what's happened to other clubs who've gone into Europe, maybe a little bit before they were ready for it. And they've got a plan in terms of, okay, well, if we get into Europe, this is the approach that we'll take. And you just know for certain that will have been on people's radars for the past 3 or 4 months, and they've been looking at it and have some insight into how to try to get around the negative impact on the team.
It's an odd one, isn't it? Because it seems to me that every Sunday for years, those 2:00 kickoffs where a team that's been in Europe, it's then a talking point about, is it too quick a turnaround? Are they going to struggle today? And yet nobody seems to do anything to tackle it. It's not a secret that playing in Europe is a stretch on your squad. So yeah, why some clubs haven't already worked out how to get around this, I do not know. If any club is going to work it out, you think it would be us, because the examples are there, the evidence is there. And as you've said, we've looked at other situations, worked out where clubs have gone wrong, and come up with a better solution. So I have it is something to think about and be aware of, but I'd have no concerns that the club wouldn't approach it and come up with a plan. I think I heard a stat that Palace have only won 3 or 4 games now on the back of a European night. I can't remember who they beat at the weekend. Funnily enough, it's escaped me, but they beat somebody quite poor. They had quite an easy
Saudi, something like that.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, they were playing in Saudi green, I think, and by all accounts, they in the second half it ended up being quite easy for them. So it is an issue. Teams do struggle, but rather than just accept that as a fact, have a look and see what we can do about it. And also, we've had plenty of conversations this season, even after our own victory against Newcastle, where we came from behind late on to win 2-1. We were saying, is it harsh to drop these players now that other figures are becoming available? So maybe there's a few lads in the squad already who were more than capable of stepping in and having extended runs in Europe, not only because they're good enough and not only because they're learning and have got the room to grow, that also then does allow you the chance to maybe rest 1 or 2 of your weekend starters, 1 or 2 of your Premier League players, and spread the workload without dropping the quality too much.
No, that's right. Now it's going to be interesting to see how we handle it if that does come around, but we'll keep our powder dry in that conversation a little bit until we see how the next month or so goes. Now, we've got a question from SJT, Tenchu Lad, and says, this could be a podcast in its own right, Andrew, as well. I'll give you a warning about that. So arguably, this is the best squad of players based on the level they perform at consistently and the quality of the opposition we've had in almost 100 years. Many speak about Rach Carter's 1930s, Charlie Hurley's 60s, the 73 team, Reedy's 95 to 01 teams. But this lot must be the best man for man. I think it's such a difficult conversation to have with that. I think you look at the team that Rach Carter played in the 30s, and you're talking about league winners, FA Cup winners, all that sort of stuff. If they played against the Sunderland team now, who'd win? Who knows? It's a completely different game in terms of fitness levels, physique, all that sort of stuff. It's incomparable. The 73 team, obviously a second division team, won the FA Cup and got promoted a little bit later. I think when you look at Reedy's team, that's the ones that it's the easiest comparison for me to make, because obviously I saw, like you, Reedy's team go both times. I just think the gap between the Championship as it is now and the Premier League wasn't really there in the late 90s, because teams could come up. You saw not just us come up and play and get 7th positions and all that sort of stuff. Ipswich came up and finished high up in the league. Teams came up regularly and and competed and did well, it wasn't automatically expected to struggle. I think the gulf between the Championship and the Premier League is so vast these days. Obviously, we've kind of built almost a new team to handle this. I would say that I think this, as I said before earlier in the pod, this team is the best team I've ever seen as a collective group. And we relied a lot on Kevin Phillips and Niall Quinn under Peter Reid. And, that probably, I wouldn't say masked some deficiencies in the team, but it helped us springboard that team in progress faster than maybe we otherwise would have. But I think from a potential point of view, this team that we have now could be the best team that we've had in living memory pretty easily, because the potential of a lot of those players is still unrealized to a large extent. And I just find the whole thing so exciting because there's so much we can look forward to with this team, hopefully.
Definitely. Yeah. In terms of looking towards the future, none of this is built on sand. None of this is because we found a one-off in the transfer market. Like Phillips, for example, I don't even think we were originally scouting Phillips. We were looking at
David Connolly, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that could be the answer for any question in the 90s, because that's one of those players we scouted every season. But yeah, we found a gem in Phillips, and he came, and Sunderland turned out to be the right place for him, and we went on a great roller coaster. I agree 100% with the word you said about potential. This squad has more potential and a higher ceiling. I think one of the reasons for that is everybody knew it was Quinn and Phillips, and it was the big man, little man. It was hard to plan against, but you knew what Sunderland were going to do. You knew they were going to get it to Johnson or Summerby, and if you could somehow stop that, you then cut off the supply to Quinn and Phillips. At the moment, how do you prepare for Sunderland? Because they are so flexible, they can change things and do things differently. We're seeing in recent weeks, we're getting a bit more of a more expansive element to our play. So yeah, agree that the potential is here at the moment. We have to make sure we harness it. We don't just blow this opportunity. How you compare us to other eras is always a difficult thought process. But people are bringing up this conversation because they think the current era is of a certain level. And the lass that sits next to me at the match on Sunday, she was just saying, I don't remember the last time we had so many players you can trust in and just be confident in. And I agreed with her. She's dead right. Just everything, man. There's times now where I realise I'm sat back actually enjoying watching us play. I'm not nervous. I'm not shaking at every high ball into the box. We've got a group at the moment who have a perfect blend of real talent, but also hunger and desire and application. And whether this ends up being one of our greatest ever teams, I don't know, but it's certainly good fun for the time being, watching them try.
No, that's right. I think you kind of overlay the quality that the players have with the tactical nous that Regis Labris brings to it, that you can see coming through every game as well, can't you? And those two things combined add up to an awful lot. I think, to be fair, unless we're winning leagues and FA Cups, I think it's impossible to say this team's better than the 1937-36 team, because they were the best team in the country at the time for the league title. We're not close to being that at the moment. Oh no, there we are. But consistently over the course of a season, it's a big ask. But it's it's tremendously exciting. And to join those conversations up a little bit, the prospect of European football, while you might look at it and go, oh shit, we'll have extra games to play, all that sort of stuff, the workload on the players, it gives players who are on the periphery, like Maenda, potentially opportunity to develop and grow and play more, keep them happy because they're getting regular football. Chris Rigg's another example, and we've got a question about Chris Rigg coming up very shortly. But I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. We've got a couple of questions about Luke O'Nien. Ryan Evans says, Luke O'Nien should no longer be doubted. Has he proven to you guys that he can play in this league? And Paul Rackstraw says, another question, I'm being serious with this. How many centre-halves need to be injured before O'Nien is in contention for a World Cup place? And you just qualify this. If Dan Burn can get in the England squad, O'Nien can't be that far off. And I do agree with that sentiment. Luke O'Nien's obviously come back into the side only fairly recently. He played at right back against Leeds. And he played centre-half at the hosts at the landfill the other day. And he played centre-half against Spurs on Sunday. So I guess the question, to tackle Ryan's question first, Andrew, has he proven to you that Luke O'Nien can play in the Premier League?
Yes, without doubt. I think in his 3 starts in the Premier League, we've conceded 1 goal, and that was because he thought he'd have a bit of fun and just give the Mags a bit of hope for a while and give them an easy goal. He's got some record this season. I think he was man of the match in virtually every FA Cup game. And in the Premier League, he's enjoying shutouts and that. There is no doubt whatsoever that he's Premier League standard. Look at some of the jobbers getting a game elsewhere in the Premier League. He's better than that. Oh, and just very quickly going back to that previous point, or one of the earlier points about Sunderland and teams not coming up from the Championship and doing as well as often as they used to. I caught some of the Championship highlights at the weekend. I don't want to be mean. It's chalk and cheese compared to the Premier League at the moment.
Oh,
so, yeah, to come from that environment and make this step up is good. And Luke O'Nien embodies that, if I think about it, because he was a Championship defender and he had a rick in him, but he was one of the better defenders, I would say. He's made the step up comfortably. I have no fears in him playing in the Premier League. Lebris doesn't, clearly, because he could have easily moved him out of the team for the Spurs game. There were other options. It wasn't like he was forced into picking O'Nien. But yeah, O'Nien can play at fullback and in the middle of defence now in the Premier League. We've seen it. As for England, we might need this. I love Luke O'Nien and I'd pick him for England if I could. But if we're being realistic, if I was an England scout or manager, I'd need to see a bit more before having that consideration. I think they've not gone through the same journey we have with Luke O'Nien just yet.
I think Dan Ballard's got more chance of being called up for England than Luke O'Nien, to paraphrase Mickey Gray.
I was going to say, I think he agrees with you on that one.
I've got a slightly different viewpoint on this with than you have, Andrew, with Luke O'Nien as Premier League level. I think I'm very comfortable with him coming in to cover for people for a game or two. I do think in the games he's played, while he has played well in the main, played very well in the main in a lot of them. Well, the 3 starts he's had. I think you look at the Leeds game, and I think we can all say he probably should have conceded a penalty in that game. You look at the Newcastle game where he gave a goal away. And the Spurs game, I know, and this is something we talked with Nick Barnes about after the Spurs game on Monday. But that penalty that was given then reversed. There was absolutely no reason for O'Nien to come in for that tackle. The lad's going nowhere. There's absolutely no reason for him to go flying, and he can just stand in his position, hold him up, block any space that is available there to try to get across, and if the lad got to the ball. And I do think he's rash. And I think at Premier League level, with the pace of the Premier League forwards, he's a constant risk of getting caught out. He's one tackle away from being caught out. And I think you look at the other incident, I think I referred to it earlier in terms of the Spurs furore about the decisions that they didn't get. The one where the lad went through and 09 goes in front of him. When you look at the replay, he does catch the back of his calf. And another referee another day gives that as a red card because he sees the lad going clean through. I think there was a covering defender who might have got there, but it was a debatable decision. And I would have if we said, right, Luke O'Nine's going to be first choice centre half next season, I would have concerns about that. If you're saying Luke O'Nine's going to be on the bench, he's going to fill in if Ballard's injured, fill in if Mukiele's injured, whoever, that's fine because I think he gives us all. He knows what he's doing. As I say, Lebris obviously trusts him. He sees him training every day. Granted, Jack has got a great deal of respect for him. You could see that in the interviews after the Leeds game. But I think, to answer Ryan's question, honestly, has Luke O'Nien proven to me that he can play Premier League football? And I'm going to interpret this as consistently. I would say he's got a few games to go yet before he can really say that. But people, and sorry, I'll let you come back in a second. But people have said this throughout Luke O'Nien's career, haven't they? When we went up from League One to the Championship, people were saying he'll never make it as a Championship footballer. And then give him a few months. Oh, he's all right in the Championship, isn't he? So, he might just need to run the games to get used to the pace of it and all that sort of stuff. He learns quickly. We've seen that throughout his Sunderland career. But right now, I think he's still got a little bit to prove to me to be a Premier League centre-half.
The only reason I'm trying to jump in is because you can see I'm desperate to defend Luke O'Nien. Nobody can have a pop at my Luke O'Nien. Listen, I know what you're doing, Martin. You're not being a spoil sport. You're being very clever and just trying to put off the top clubs from coming and stealing it from us. I know what you're doing. No, I take your point. He's not going to displace somebody like Dan Ballard on a permanent basis, but he's a great figure to have around the club, both on the pitch and off the pitch. I know where you're coming from if we're being serious, but for me, he's proven that he warrants his place at the club at the moment. Yeah, and I know you're not disagreeing. No. I fully know where you're coming from, and had he played a full season at centre back, we perhaps wouldn't be having these conversations about Europe. But I'd rather he was at Sunderland and part of the group than wasn't at the moment.
100%. Completely agree with you about that. And I think, again, he's a great player to have around the squad just for his playing ability. I think he's a great option to have on the bench because he can fill in a number of positions. He's well versed in what Lebris wants from the team in various positions. But also everything that we know about him, he is so important for that group of players off the field as well. And that can never, ever, ever be underestimated. I think we saw the repercussions of getting rid of good characters a decade or so ago. And it's something we need to protect and be very careful of. Now, we've got a few questions. I'm going to do some quick-fire questions for you here, Andrew. So, Joe Brown asks, is Riggs' performances showing why it was a good idea not to loan him out in January? I think he had a little bit of a quieter game on Sunday, but I think against Brighton and against the hosts a few weeks ago, I thought he was brilliant. And he's obviously played the club rate highly and really fancy for the future.
I don't know what quick fire is, but yeah, he was a little bit quieter, but he still had moments of quality. He looks comfortable at this level. There was a few times where there were balls dropping down from high, and he's watched it, and his technique was brilliant. I think it was the right decision to keep him at the club. I don't think there's much for him to learn by going back to the Championship, for example. He's much better suited to working on the training ground with the likes of Xhaka. And we're seeing now he's a player of potential, but he's also a player for the here and now. We're not carrying him. He's doing a job. And like the squad in general, I think it's exciting times for him to see where his career goes. He's heading in the right direction.
I think loan moves are difficult as well, aren't they, to really pinpoint the right one. Now, I watched the Norwich versus Ipswich game at the weekend, and Dan Neil sat on the bench. I'm like, how can Dan Neil not get into that team? But, for whatever reason, he can't get a permanent role in that Ipswich midfield. And you think, well, Chris Rigg goes out on loan to a similar type of club in a similar position in the league. For them, if they're challenging up at the top, which is where you'd want a player to go to, you want them scrapping at the bottom for survival. You want them to go to a successful team, a successful club playing, successful winning football. Yeah. But then that manager's got to integrate them, get them used to playing in their way, give them a chance to take somebody else out of the team. And, there's no guarantees that a loan move immediately gets that player regular football, never mind the development. And as you say, I think training alongside Granit Xhaka every day is probably the best education Chris Rigg can get at the moment. Now, Chris Day asks a question about Chemsine Talby. He says, after being absolutely magnificent against Newcastle, Talby once again found himself sat on the bench. Why? Come on, Labris. Answer the question.
Sorry. Why? Because we've got a squad with options there. We're not wedded to a particular lineup or formation anymore, and we've got a head coach who is willing to make difficult decisions, and there'll be no. Talby won't be sat there thinking, "What's happened here?" Labris will explain his decisions, maybe not each individual decision, but there'll be a culture within the group that they know that even if they're not starting, they've still got a role to perform. And it is a shame at the moment when lads are dropping in and out of the side. But for me, it's a sign of a head coach utilising his squad better. It's not one of those situations where he's panicking and just throwing things mud against the wall and seeing what sticks. Talby's a young lad learning his trade and is part of a group that between them are getting us where we need to be, and his time will come. He'll start again in this run-in, and he'll have moments where he can provide and contribute.
I think it's just a fact of football at this sort of level, in 2026, and this sort of generation where it is really a squad game. And the reality is, you got Lafayette coming back fully fit. He's got to play because he's so bloody good. And really, it was a choice between Chris Rigg and Talby, I think, for selection on Sunday. And we've talked about Chris Rigg's last couple of performances. I would argue he's probably been better than Talby over the last couple of weeks. What does it do to Chris Rigg to take him out of the team after performing so well for a couple of games, leave him in for a couple of games? As I say, Talby will be back in soon enough. So I just think that's a consequence of having a pretty decent squad and players getting back to fitness. A very easy one for you here, Andrew. Billy at Billy Blythe says, who do you think is the most underrated player for Sunderland you've ever seen in your lifetime?
Oh.
I will leave you to ponder on that one. I'm going to come back to that and Mount Rushmore very soon. I've been thinking about that whole podcast, and I haven't actually been able to come up with anybody.
And you expect me to do it in a few minutes? That's not fair, that, Mark.
You're the fountain of knowledge, man. Mackenbauer at Nathan Gunn 13 asks, and this is a question related to team selection and also looking at potentially playing in Europe next season. How important is that we sign a Granit Xhaka understudy this summer? He'll be 34 next season and will need the odd rest or pick up knocks. If we nick a European place, he simply can't play 50-plus games. I think this is the most important signing of this window to keep moving forward. And I think it's right in terms of having somebody who's able to step in for Granit Xhaka. And we know that if Xhaka's not able to play, this player goes in. Now, it could be somebody switching position. It could be Siddiqui goes back, and we know that Siddiqui can do that job. It could even be Chris Rigg. I've said before, I think Chris Rigg will end up playing centrally sooner rather than later, and I think the club could well see him as that. But is it as important as Nathan suggests that we sign somebody who is capable of stepping into Granit Xhaka's position? Because the obvious question there is, can you sign somebody of sufficient quality who's happy being an understudy next season?
Well, yeah, that would be extremely difficult to find. And if I had a name in mind, I wouldn't be making it public. I'd be I'd be dropping a message to the club. I think it is important that we have a plan B. I don't like the idea of using the word or the phrase a Granit Xhaka replacement, because that would be a lot of pressure to put on somebody's shoulders, and there can't be many people who could do it directly. I think you're right. Even when Xhaka's out, it won't just be a case of simply switching in a new player and he just picks up the baton and does all the same things. I think there'd be tweaks across the midfield, and Siddiqui might have to do some things slightly different. Other players might have to take on roles. So, yes, we need to plan for it. If we were to find somebody who we think could be an understudy, if you want to use that term, by all means make it happen. I'd be a little bit worried that the expectation on that one person would be a lot. And yeah, it might be the case that actually we are looking at Rig and we're wanting him to become that person in due course, but there's an acceptance that it takes time, and in the meantime he'll perform different roles. I think I've covered that without saying anything, without dropping myself in it. It is a tricky one.
No, it is a tricky one. I understand the thought process here for some of this perspective, right? So I think if you look at the type of player that Xhaka is, he'll hold that midfield position probably more than the other players will. He can win the ball, he can prompt play, all that sort of stuff. And I don't think we've got a natural player who plays like that currently in the squad. Other players can drop deeper, and I think we saw it at various parts of the season where Xhaka's actually played different roles in midfield. He hasn't always sat. He's been sometimes leading the press on occasion. We saw it during AFCON where Lafay kind of came back in and played a little bit deeper and played alongside him, and he was the one actually sitting, and Xhaka was going a bit further forward. So I actually think looking at this problem, I'm going to turn into Labris here, looking for a solution to this problem isn't as simple as finding a direct replacement. I think the solution lies in other players doing different things. And look, of course, we need to invest again in the squad and bring probably not the quantity of players in, but we need to bring in some more quality players during the summer. Probably a few more if we do get into Europe as well, but we'll be able to attract more because there'll be more football on offer, a higher level of football on offer. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how we supplement the squad that we've got. And Joe Lewins, Andrew, asks, if we are pushing for top 10 finish and achieve Europe and all that sort of stuff, we would need to invest. However, if we keep all of our defenders, including Robin Roofs, we probably only need a defensive midfield player, a right winger, and a versatile striker. And again, I think this is a situation where the club don't necessarily look at this like that. And I think we saw that during that period of time where everyone from the outside was going, Sunderland need a striker to replace Ross Stewart. And because the right person didn't become available, we didn't leap in and get somebody. But if a quality player becomes available, and again, we saw this during the summer where you think, why are we signing another player who can play out wide? Because we've already signed somebody who can play wide. But if quality players become available who will improve the squad, we'll try to get them. And then, that's not to say that we'll just go willy-nilly and sign anybody and end up with 25 left wingers. But I think you're looking at it a little bit differently, because then you might go, well, actually, can Lafay go over to the right-hand side? Nobody would envisage Lafay playing left wing all season, but for the vast majority of it, he has. So I think it's really difficult sat here right now to look and see what positions will we bring in during the summer. Yes, I think we do probably need competition on the right wing, because I'm not sure whether Traore will stay or not. If Isidore goes, naturally there's a spot there for another striker to come in. But it's going to be an interesting summer, I think, is the upshot of it all, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Listen, this question, that last question, all of the questions today, they're all fair questions. I can understand why people are asking them. but the answers are tough because, things aren't how they used to be. Kelvin used to always joke, "Oh, Sunderland were a canny team, but we were just 2 players away." It's not how things are. I take your point about if we finish higher and if we do qualify for Europe, it brings money in and it means we can attract a better profile player. The club are seen on a wider platform then. You mentioned it just there, Martin, but that actually would have been a fair answer to have made when we were talking about, do we want to go for it and qualify for Europe? So, the summer, we could be in a real position of strength, but we won't have a whiteboard with just 10 names on it and we go for target number 1, and if that doesn't happen, we go for target number 2. We'll be keeping an eye on things, and if somebody becomes available and they're better than what we've got, well, thank you very much to the lad who's been playing this season, but sorry, you're now in reserve and you're going to have to fight for your place because we're going to make it happen. I heard Lucimi's name. I think he might have played against Aston Villa in Europe.
He did.
Yeah, he was somebody we were really hot on last season and it didn't happen. But if, for example, he's available or a player of his style and standard is available, they'll try and make it happen. And if that means somebody like Alderete or whoever then has to fight for their place, well, great. That's a good thing. Aye. Yes, right wing is potentially a position where nobody's nailed that spot down. But if we can't find somebody who is guaranteed to do well, we're not going to make it. We're not going to spend it for the sake of it. And if we start next season without a right winger or whatever position people decide was our main target, that doesn't mean we haven't looked at it. It doesn't mean we've failed or we've ballsed up. It just means that we're playing a longer game.
Right, we're going to come back to Billy's question. Most underrated Sunderland player you've seen in your lifetime?
That's a tough question. I think I know a Billy Blythe. So if it is the person I think I know, just get back in touch and tell us so that I know to ignore you in future because you've given us a shocking question. Most underrated player in Sunderland. Oh, have you got any possible?
I'll give you my answer.
Okay,
and you'll be surprised at this one. Kevin Phillips. I think massively underrated outside of Sunderland. He should have been an England striker with 70, 80 caps, and because he played for Sunderland, he didn't get the recognition or the honours he deserved because I thought he was the best striker certainly in the Premier League, if not in Europe, for 2 or 3 seasons, and he did not get the recognition. That's my answer for you.
Good. I see you thinking.
Mount Rushmore. 4 people from the last decade. Who would be?
I was going to say, I'm glad you've moved on from that last question, but you've just brought us back to another tricky question. England caps or not, most of us would probably agree with Luke O'Nien, do you reckon?
I've made my list and Luke O'Nien's on there, so definitely Luke O'Nien is on the Sunderland Mount Rushmore. Fine.
Are we just sticking to players?
I've got a manager in there.
Ah, right. Because Lebris might be a decent shout. I'm trying to read you.
Lebris is on my list. Yeah,
I'm trying to read your mind there. my head is playing tricks with me and is determined to make a show of myself. It just keeps shouting Christian Speakman for some reason, and I'm not. I respect the role he did. I think he's had a major role in our progress over the last 10 years. I don't think he's quite Mount Rushmore though. Oh, Martin, this is.
I'll give you mine. Regis Lebris, Luke O'Nien, Dan Ballard.
Nice, yeah.
And the fourth one, Ross Stewart, because I do not think we get out of League One without him.
Yeah. I thought you were going to go with. I thought you were leaning towards Trey Hume there. I thought that's who you were building up to, again, because he's somebody who's come up through the leagues with us. But Ross Stewart was the player that turned us from a handy side into a. I don't mind that. I think this type of conversation is one for it's quiet in the pub. You've got a couple of pints on the table. You can keep going back to the bar if you want. And that is a great conversation to have. I like your thinking, mate, and I might just go quiet at that point so I don't have to think about it too much. But yeah, so we're agreed a bris, which is a mixture of, well, that's what we do. If we merge... Yeah, if we merge Luke O'Briss, then we've got three others to play with. So I think those two are definitely good bets.
Very good. We will leave people to ponder on that. And if you want to tell us your Sunderland Mount Rushmore from the past decade, you can email us at howaythepodcast@safc@gmail.com. And of course, if you have any questions for the next Q&A that we are going to do probably next week, please send them to that email address as well. Thank you, Andrew. We've covered a lot of ground there. It's been a pleasure, mate.
It has been. It's I've loved it. Like we said, loads of great questions. Very quickly as well, I'd just, if I may, like to say thank you to the people who during International Fans Weekend came and they spoke to me, they spoke to Kelvin, they spoke to a few other people who listened to the pod, people who were dead passionate about Sunderland. It was really nice, some of the things people said. I'll tell you off air as well, Martin, because people were complimentary of you. But I know you're too shy a lad to hear it on tape. But just amazing that these people love Sunderland. And I was speaking to one lad who travelled from Minneapolis. I wish he'd lived in somewhere like New York now that's easier to pronounce. But
was he an analyst?
That's all right, fair dues. Just he came up and he said some really nice things, like a lot of other people. We love having a bit crack about Sunderland. It's really nice to think that other people like doing the same, talking about the club, and it's nice that people ask us questions and for whatever reason like to know our opinions on SAFC.
No, that's right. So great place to finish. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back tomorrow. I think there's a news pod lined up for tomorrow. I think we'll probably go into the legend stones a little bit deeper as well in that news pod, as well as a few other things that are going on around the football club. But until then, it's goodbye from us.